Greetings, I am Tom Earl. On this week's episode, I interview Syrian American poet Dania Alkhouli. Check it out. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the celebration. As you know, this is my year of courage. We know you could be anywhere. So the fact that you are here sharing your gifts, your life, your time, your energy, we appreciate the heck out of that. We hope you know that during this time, if nowhere else in your life, that this is a brave space where you are loved, where you are appreciated, where we got your back. As you can see here, since I am not alone, I have an amazing guest. High five.
Hey.
Boom. She goes by the name of Dania Alkhouli. And let me tell you a little bit about Dania. All right? Am I doing good so far?
You're doing great.
You know what I'm saying? That last part was that?
Yeah.
Okay, dope.
Yeah.
Dania is a Syrian American author and poet, born and raised in Southern California. She earned her bachelor's in sociology and her master's in public policy, all at Cal State Long Beach. She published her first book at the age of 19. Where were you when you were 19? I was on probation, being arrested, so not publishing my first book. And her second book came out in 2017, and it's called Oceans and Flames. In 2012, she and her awesome mother founded a nonprofit organization called A Country Called Syria. How did I do?
You did great.
Yeah?
Yeah.
The bio can only do so much.
Oh, well.
So break down some of that stuff for us. What was some, any of that stuff, your book? Tell us about the nonprofit, anything you're feeling.
Well, yeah, actually the nonprofit is a big part of our life right now, especially because we have our next exhibit coming up this fall in Claremont, which will be our 12th exhibition that we've done in the last 6.5 years. And each time we grow and we learn a lot more, and we realize how much interest there is in learning about the roots of Syria, especially, with what's going on right now in the media. People are still trying to reconcile and understand Syria on a much more deeper level. And so that's our goal with this nonprofit. So that's taking up a lot of time trying to, figure out the next space, the next event, the next exhibition. But it's definitely a really exciting adventure. I'm learning a lot about Syria that I didn't even know. It's beautiful to be able to work with my mom on something that we're so passionate about. So I really love that that aspect of my life. Yeah,
that's wonderful. What's that like? Working with your mom so closely on a project that I'm sure has a lot of roller coasters to it.
There's definitely a lot of roller coasters to just dealing with nonprofit in general. And then nonprofit about Syria, it's another loop. But working with my mom is probably the best part. I think I'm really blessed that I have a very great relationship with my mom. She's been the backbone of everything in my life. And so working together just makes sense. We understand each other. We're like similar teammates. We know what we want. We have shared goals, and so it just flows. We literally complete each other as we're working, so it just becomes really easy and second nature. Yeah,
I vouch. Your mom's awesome. That's how I met you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Through Newgrounds storytelling event.
Yep. You had longer hair back then.
I did. That's when I had dreads.
Yeah.
What's the story, or what are some of the stories that you and your mom are hoping to highlight?
I think the biggest one is a lot of people have strong misconceptions about the Middle East in general. I mean, I still get questions of like, so you guys, ride camels and live in tents? And it's like, no, we have an apartment and a house, and there's a life, there's civilization. And people don't know that about the Middle East, and especially about Syria, because what's being highlighted in the media, it's important that people are aware of what's going on in Syria, but there's a stronger connection that develops when they understand the history and the roots of the country. Like, people do not know that the first linear alphabet discovered in the entire world was in Syria.
Wow.
And from that developed all the languages that we speak today. So that by itself is enough information to kind of... And we get that feedback when people visit our exhibition and they leave. They're like, we had no idea that Syria was this amazing. So that's really the biggest takeaway from our work.
Side tangent. What's a nonlinear alphabet?
I don't really know. I think I'm not sure how it was described, but I think whether it's geometric shapes or not. So I think it's based off that phonetic breakdown.
That's dope. Thanks for answering my aside.
Yeah, but that's like my assumption here, based off like my analytical nature. I feel like that's what it would mean, but I could look that up.
Okay. If y'all know out there, let us know. There it is.
Yeah.
How do you find that storytelling and getting to build a relationship with an unknown, how does that affect people's biases and assumptions?
It breaks down a lot. I think a lot of people, I mean, the biggest example I can see is we had a couple exhibitions where people were just reluctant to actually walk in and see it, even though it was on their campus or whatever, until something pushed them to it. And after they did, they're like, okay, we have a completely different understanding of the Middle East, of Syria, of the whole situation. So I think it's a great way to break down those barriers, those walls that people are building, the fear of the unknown. So once you know it, it's no longer that frightening element.
I'm going to ask a putting yourself out there question.
Okay.
Was there ever a time in your life where maybe you had an assumption or bias and you had a similar experience maybe that people had that go through your exhibit?
I think so. And I can't think of a specific example, but I know that growing up in a conservative community, it definitely built walls. And it wasn't until I explored more of my artwork and became more engrossed in the art community that I was like, I had built up a lot of walls that I didn't even know about. And now I feel a lot more accepting, a lot less judgmental. But now I feel judged and exiled from the community I grew up in because it's like, oh, you're okay with these things, but we're not okay with these things. So the thing that I love most about being in the art world and the poetry world is that everybody looks at everyone as human. That's it. Regardless of your sexual orientation, your religion, your race, what you're wearing, what you look like, they're not looking at that. They're looking at your soul. And I love that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Speaking of, so why poetry?
That just came naturally to me. Honestly, I started writing when I was about 10.
Okay.
And I started documenting them when I was about 11, 12. And then throughout high school, I kept writing, but I kept it a secret because I just thought it was cheesy childhood poetry, you know, things that rhyme, that were short, you know. And then around maybe like college years, I was like, I think I want to publish a book. I feel like I want to see my work compiled together. I want to give it value. And so after graduating with my bachelor's, I did my research and I prepared my first book and got it published. And although it wasn't like a huge success, for me it was a proud accomplishment. I had a goal and I did it. I went for it. And it encouraged me to keep going.
What were some of the steps or what was some of the moments within that journey of publishing your first book where you're like, yes?
The journey, I think, like editing it, I didn't let anyone else edit it but myself because I felt like this is my raw words, my soul. So I don't think anyone would understand what I'm looking for. So I'll edit myself. That part was really eye-opening. And just trying to find a publisher, trying to pitch the book, things like that. I learned a lot from that experience that shifted my approach to publishing the second time around. Like
what were some lessons learned you had?
Definitely scoping out more publishers and not just keeping it at a few, meeting others, doing more. Now I know what questions to ask, what legal elements to look into. I was 19. And I had sought out a lot of assistance from community members who had published, and surprisingly, I got zero support.
Wow.
So now when people approach me about publishing questions, I make an effort to give them the time of day to answer their questions because I'm from the background and the mindset of we should support each other. There's enough room in this world for everyone's success. I don't see why we shouldn't. So, and it hurt a lot as a 19-year-old to be, you know, given the advice of like, you're nobody. Why are you trying to publish?
Dang.
I was like,
that's not advice.
I know, right? It was like, go build your reputation, go publish in like magazines and literary journals before you come here trying to publish a book. And it's like, give me suggestions of where to go and how to do that so that I can build the reputation. Don't just shut the door in my face.
Yeah.
So I definitely strive to make sure that I'm never shutting the door in other people's faces because art and anything in life, actually, each person brings their own touch to it. So why are we neglecting someone else's contribution?
Yeah, I mean. So why don't we stop, teasing y'all and give you some of the poetry that you've been talking about. How's that sound?
That sounds perfect.
So what's the first poem you're going to do?
We're going to do Mind Over Body first, with a quote starting from Body Language.
And is there any intro or any context you want to give for this one?
Yes, those two are about sexual assault, which is, so the second book, Oceans and Flames, is all about domestic violence and my personal experience of overcoming it. So those two poems highlight that part. And they were very difficult to write because I never intended on publishing a book about the experience, especially a poetry book. But I just felt like it was the greatest form of therapy for me. And then just sharing pieces before publication, I saw the need from so many women in our community who were like, oh, someone is talking about this, and we were never allowed to. Especially sexual assault. I mean, that's, sex by itself is a taboo in the Muslim community. You can't talk about it.
Yeah.
It's inappropriate. So to talk about sexual assault is even a bigger deal, and that's why I made an effort to write about it. So that's what those two poems, the quote and the poem, are about.
And what's the titles one more time?
Body Language and Mind Over Body.
All right, let's hear it.
She yearned for someone to make her body feel special because it was hers, not someone who made her feel special because of her body. Body language. You don't deserve my body until you earn my mind. I should have said that to him. I should have recognized my own worth that moment. I should have found the courage to throw away 24 years of overzealous humility to save myself, but I couldn't. He didn't even ask, he just took it. Everything. He stole a kiss from me, and I mean that phrase in every sense of literalism. He stole a kiss. Stole. What an ugly phrase we've learned to romanticize so well that women have learned to fear fighting back. When their bodies are being taken, that women have learned it's more ladylike to let him have his way instead of saying stop. To cry for hours later on the drive home in shame and fear, that women have learned to research methods of abortion and set aside enough money to cover the cost of morning after pills because he can't even be man enough to protect you. You. Even that's awful. You women are the ones in need of protection because who else will go down with an unwanted or unexpected pregnancy? Yes, I am a feminist. No, I am not a man hater, but I hate that man, and I hate that man who shushed me in the dark as he did what he wanted. That was the one night I tried to push him away. I cried. My body did too. Still, he didn't stop. He never earned my mind. He hated my mind. He tried so hard to break it, and he almost succeeded until I made up my mind. Walking out the door and never looking back has been the greatest memory I keep, but what haunts me is the reality that no man seems to carry the ability to blow my mind without needing my body as the mechanism. So until then, you don't deserve my body if you can't earn my mind.
Let's snap it up. It's powerful.
Thank you.
What was that like when you first started performing those poems? Because they're very vulnerable and intimate and real. I
think the best word to describe was fear. I was genuinely afraid of performing them, and I had a lot of reservations, so I'd never performed them with utmost confidence until actually I published. So I had written them throughout the experience, and I kept them hidden, and I never, if I even did perform, like I said, it was just ambivalence, anxiety, because I just thought, I'm going to be judged, I'm going to be ridiculed, and I did. I'm going to be silenced, so it was very hard, but then after I published it, I was like, no, come at me. Like, I'm good. I'm going to keep saying this till the end of time, so.
And was there a difference between when you would perform it, like, within an art community versus Muslim community?
Oh, yeah. Big deal. Big difference. In art community in general, I feel like there's always that acceptance of no matter what, as long as there's no hate speech and discrimination, it's a safe space to talk about whatever you want. And I'm hoping, and I'm seeing that some Muslim spaces are becoming that way, which is a big relief. But I hope it grows into even more.
What was it like performing it for the Muslim community?
I was still really nervous despite publication, but again, I'd get into my own head and say, like, you're doing something it's not even a personal vendetta, it's a community need. So there's no room for that hesitation.
I talked about on the previous episode, another episode with Sahar from Heart.
Yeah.
And I shared with her, we were talking about the same thing, how I performed some poems within Muslim space, and it talked about between people who are married, that like if a guy forces his wife to have sex, that it's rape, and that people came up to me and were like, no, that's not rape.
Oh my God. Yeah, I still hear that all the time. Because there's this assumption that sex is a creation for man, and therefore he's entitled to it any time of day, especially from his wife, which is definitely the farthest thing from the truth.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So did you find that conversations or people come up to you and have conversations with you afterwards?
I have. I've had positive and negative. I've had positive where people are like, thank you for finally saying this. You know, we would never be able to, but we're glad someone is doing it. And then I've had individuals who are like, you know, you really should stop talking about this now, or you should be over it. And the biggest thing about that gets me is that just because I still talk about it doesn't mean I'm not over it. It means this is an issue our community has not finished handling yet. I'm over it. So long gone. I moved on, you know, dated other people, didn't work out, kept moving on. But I'm not over the fact that our community is still, our society. I mean, right now, the Me Too movement and everything. This is an issue that's not done.
Yeah, now it's an element of advocacy and awareness.
Absolutely.
What impact do you hope poetry has?
So many. I mean, poetry itself is a really powerful source of change and activism. It's words, it's lyrics, it's very spiritual. I think sometimes it reaches people on a deeper level than just having a conversation or a lecture. I just got to see a pre-screening of Blind Spotting, which comes out this Friday. It's a film that talks about racism in America, and it's so powerful. And there's a very strong poetic theme running throughout the film, and even the scripts, the way they talk, the monologues, the conversation, the give and take, it's poetic. And so it presents the truth in such a powerful form you cannot ignore it. And I feel like poetry does that. It puts it in your face in a way that you can't. I mean, honestly, I spent a good majority of the movie crying because it was just so, it's literally in your face. It's very powerful.
What do you think are the conversations we as Muslims need to be having about race?
Oh my goodness. How much time do we have?
We have an hour.
There's a lot. I feel like first and foremost, everybody needs to become aware of the fact that it exists within the Muslim community, because I think there's a huge sense of denial. Like, there's no racism. Islam is against, I'm like, Islam is against racism. Muslims are not not racist. So let's, you know, break that down. I think that's the first one. And I'm finding that people are not recognizing issues until it hits them personally. And I feel like that's something I relate to on domestic violence. We're like, no, it doesn't really happen. Like, it hasn't happened to you. But just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it's non-existent. So I think that's the biggest conversation that needs to happen. A presentation to the Muslim communities and societies that are oblivious to what's going on, or even perpetrating it themselves with their own privileges.
When in your journey as an activist did you start to embrace or become like, I want to use my talents and my leadership to like aid in activism and to fight oppression and those kind of things? I
think I've always been a bit rebellious.
Okay.
So the most perfect example I can remember is in 3rd grade. I remember, and I really owe it to my mom for putting fuel on that fire and nurturing it. I used to go to an Islamic school in 3rd grade, and our campus, to be polite, was very unclean. The grass was like dead, trash everywhere, and we were right across the street from a public school where it was like green grass, beautiful. And every day when my mom would pick us up, I'd ask her, like, why is the Muslim school so dirty? And why is the other school so perfect? And so she's like, why don't you ask the administration? Like, let's do this. And so she had talked to the school admin, like, my daughter wants to talk to the school at the assembly line, because every morning we'd meet and we'd have assembly in front of the whole school, and you know, we do the pledge, we do announcements, things like that. So the next day, she literally got me a time slot in the assembly, and I'm this little 7-year-old girl in pigtails with glasses and buck teeth. And I'm just like, Muslim friends, we can't have a campus that's this dirty and embarrassing, and right across the street is a school that's like, why don't we follow that example? So I was like, I think I've always been that kind of person. I don't think it's anything new. It just, every year I go through, you know, things that maybe open me up a little bit more, whether it's traumatic incidences or life lessons, and it just shapes me even more. I think the last 2 years of my life have really redefined me to become even more unapologetic. And I know that's such an overused word right now, but I embrace it because it's really what I feel.
What does it feel like, or what is unapologetic in the context of you personally? What is that for you?
I feel like I'm not holding back at all. You know, I think I was always like, well, I'm going to be an activist, but like ladylike, you know, I'm going to like try to be classy about it. And now I feel like there's no room to be extra classy. I mean, you don't have to be trashy, but there's that level of like, I'm not going to worry about who's a little offended by the truth. If you can't handle the truth, that's not my problem. I feel like it's 2018. There's no more room to sugarcoat things. It is what it is.
Kind of like the respectability part. Yeah. Where you have to be, if I'm respectable, then I'll get more respect.
And I can't do that. In the sense of, there's just too much at stake right now. I'm not going to hold back just because someone thinks this is not the way an appropriate good girl should behave. I'm not being inappropriate. I'm just being truthful.
There it is. And we found time and time again that even people who are being like the most respectable, like still aren't shown dignity and respect. It doesn't protect them. You know? What was it, do you think, that like you were like, I'm gonna let this go and I'm gonna embrace being unapologetic? What do you think was the momentum that built up to that?
I think it was really just the divorce, you know, getting out of that, because for me, I didn't even recognize that it was an abusive relationship until after it was over, and I started having flashbacks and just regurgitating everything, and I was like, wait, that's not even a normal, like this wasn't even a civil breakup. Maybe this whole thing wasn't a healthy relationship. And I just, piece by piece, I started realizing someone had took advantage of my trust and my love, my body, my soul, my mind, everything, and leaving and trying to piece that all together, and then hearing community say, you know, it's okay, sometimes two people just don't work out. And I was like, wait, that's not what happened. And it was digesting all of that. I was like, yeah, we need to talk about this. There's something going on. And I think being the rebel, you know, when someone tells you don't do something, it's like, oh, now I want to do it. So it's like, don't talk about that. You know, you're not supposed to talk about a past relationship. I was like, yeah, I'm not talking about a past relationship. I'm talking about a phenomenon that's going on in our society. So I think that was the artillery I needed to kind of be like, yeah, there's no holding back anymore.
Well, we appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
Do you mind if we hear another poem?
Of course.
Let's do it. What's this poem called?
This one's called Psychological Warfare.
Okay. Yeah. Anything you want to context, or should we just go into it?
I think the first time I performed that one, I actually was provoked by a gentleman. I'm being polite and calling him a gentleman. 10 minutes before I performed it. So it gave fuel.
Like he was heckling you from the audience?
No, he was sitting actually next to me and Nada when we were at the performance, and he just was adamant about, he's like, I've actually wanted to talk to you for a while and let you know that, you know, you've been talking a lot about, you know, the divorce, the domestic violence. You should probably stop doing that now.
Wow.
And I said, why? He's like, because I don't really think women get abused. I think men do, and women just manipulate the situation.
Wow.
I was like, that's a really interesting perspective, but no. And so he just went on, and it was very frustrating. I felt like I was being victim blamed, being silenced, and this was about 5 months after the divorce, so it was still relatively fresh.
Yeah.
So I thank him, though, because it made performing it all the more better.
This was at the same event we were both at?
Yeah.
Wow. All right, let's do this.
Yeah. Ready. Just because the snake that bit you is gone doesn't mean the side effects of its venom won't linger for ages to come. My conscience is tired of bearing the weight of the sins you created for me. Every vertebra of my spine grinds against one another in an agonizing anticipation of the grand finale. You told me the blue flames were the safest to touch, when in reality those would be the ones that burned too much, and yet I still believed you. I trusted you. I surrendered every piece of my heart and soul for you, but you were a liar, a man with a heavy artillery of weapons to destroy the inner psyche of an enemy that was never one to begin with in the first place. A woman who had given up her entirety to fill up your empty space, but it was never enough. I was never enough. You may have won every battle over the course of our tainted years, but I won the war when I walked away without shedding a single tear. There were no white flags raised, no peace treaties signed, just my back turned to you, taking those first steps towards the freedom long overdue. Finally finding that all was quiet on the Western Front this whole time, but I was too imprisoned in the psychology of your horrid crimes. Like you said so often, the best was yet to come, and I had found it when I moved on and picked up the pieces of mine you left undone. But just because the snake that bit you is gone doesn't mean the side effects of its venom won't linger for ages to come.
We snap it up. Another powerful, and you really, I think, not a lot of poets, we have that courage to speak from the personal. That it's like issues out here that are, take courage to talk about, but aren't as vulnerable as sharing your personal truth. There was a line in there about something, the snake that bit you. What was the line?
Yeah, just because the snake that bit you is gone doesn't mean the side effects of its venom won't linger for ages to come. And I actually start and end the poem with that line to kind of emphasize the point of the lasting effects of psychological and emotional abuse, and how they do alter a person drastically. Yeah,
I realized maybe about the same time, 2-3 years ago, that I also was in a abusive relationship. It wasn't an intimate partner, it was a different kind of relationship. And one that society says that, like, you have to stay in. And so realizing that, like, I don't have to put up with this. But I realized that in my life, all these different ways it started to warp what I thought love should look like. Like, one big one was speaking up for myself. I thought that if I speak up for myself, then the person will leave or withhold love. You know what I mean?
Right.
That was one of the things, realizations I came up with what you're talking about. The venom's still in there.
It is. It's a lasting impact. It changes your perspective, your approach to things in life.
What do you think are some, like, methods or avenues for healing?
I'm definitely an advocate for finding your means of therapy. Sometimes just seeing a therapist is one way that might not work for everyone. I found a lot of relief in dance therapy. Just doing different dance classes. I felt like I regained ownership of my body again, being in dance class, because I get to dictate the movements, the way that I do things. Poetry was a big help for me, and not just writing it, but then going out and sharing it and hearing other community members' pain. I think when you start to focus on healing together, it's not just you anymore. You feel a sense of growth.
So expressing yourself with other people as well.
Oh, yeah.
That's powerful. What do you think are some misconceptions that people have around these conversations we're having?
There's so many. I mean, for starters, I think a lot of people in the more conservative or traditional mindsets still think these are conversations that don't need to happen, or they're inappropriate, especially if a woman is talking about them. Like I said, the individual that had provoked me prior to performing that last piece, it was, he was adamant about the idea of, like, it's inappropriate culturally and religiously for you to keep doing this. You need to tone it down. I was like, okay, I don't know how to respond to this. It's, there's nothing to say anymore. I'm going to keep going.
Drives me crazy.
It's frustrating, because it's like and it's funny because even after the performance, he was still adamant to keep giving me a piece of his mind. And then when I didn't respond, he decided to message me online. And then when I didn't respond, it just kept escalating until a block button was used. It's like, we're done. We're done.
I get and don't get where the entitlement comes from. That, like, actually, I know what's best for you and your body and your mind and your process, and you should listen to me.
As cliche as it sounds, because everyone talks about it, but it's the truth. I think it's that patriarchal vein that runs through everything, and until we start having, until we start untying those things and changing that, it's just going to be, because even now in the new generation, I'm finding that as open-minded and liberal and as feminist as men are, there will be a little bit, there will hit a certain point where they'll default back to that, and they don't realize it. And I've met a couple of men who've, defaulted back to that, and I pointed it out, and they were actually humble about it, in the sense of, you're right, and I didn't realize that about myself, I need to put that in check. And I appreciate those men, because they recognize the value of humbling yourself and working on yourself. And there's totally nothing wrong with constantly growing and developing, because that's life.
Yeah, in fact, there's something wrong with the opposite.
Exactly. That stagnancy of, like, oh, I'm done growing.
Yeah.
You're not. Not quite. We're not done until we're dead.
Yeah. And even then, who knows?
I actually want, you know, those like the construction signs that says end of work zone?
Yeah.
I want that to be my tombstone. Because it's like, you know, I'm now my work is done. You know, I'm constantly working on myself. There's always construction, but now it's done.
Yes.
So, you know, just note to self, note to everybody out there. That's what I want.
This counts as the will. Well, you know, going back, I have to say, you know, you're saying you appreciate men who own their shit. That I have to say, as a man who tries to own my shit, I appreciate just the opportunity to be invited in, you know, or called out. Because I know even in my relationship with Adora, just last week, twice she was like, I feel like that was kind of mansplaining. It was like, oh my God, like, you're right. Because my whole life I've been programmed to think, like, no, you are the best at explaining this, Tom Earl. Like, you have it. And you just sometimes, like, default into it.
Because it's subliminal. It's subliminal everywhere. So you can't really avoid it. So that's why this goes for both. Like, just because it's a patriarchal issue doesn't mean that sometimes we don't need to be put in check. I'm always open to hearing. It's just I don't want to be criticized for something that I know. For example, like that gentleman or any other person that's trying to silence me. Because, you know, we can tell when we're being put in check for the right reasons and when we're being criticized and broken down.
Yeah.
So it should be that balanced give and take in society.
Exactly. Like when I'm trying to give you feedback that upholds an institution of oppression versus invites you into a way of living that dismantles it.
Very true.
Where do you see these kind of conversations we're having now happening?
I see them happening in more smaller spaces, definitely in art spaces, and I think in communities. I don't want to even use the word community because I don't see them happening on a large-scale community basis. I see them happening at smaller get-togethers, maybe groups of people who feel like they've had it with the system of society, people who feel rejected or out of place, unappreciated for their mindset. When they get together, I see this growing, but I feel like they end up creating more power and movement than other places. I hope to see these conversations happening in larger institutions, and especially religious ones, cultural ones.
You know, what keeps you, I think, you know, I hear this question a lot, what keeps you invested or in being Muslim with all that? You know, we've kind of highlighted a lot of the stuff we need to work on. Like, what keeps you here?
What keeps me here is knowing the difference between Islam and Muslims. I know the difference. And so I will never judge a religion based on its people's behaviors. And like I said, I'm really grateful to have grown up with a mother who educated us on the difference. And I know what's culture, what's religion, what's people's behavior, what's religion. And so my faith is my faith. I do believe, you know, God is just, and I do understand what he wants from us. And I know that it's not this misery that we're creating amongst each other. So that won't change. And even when I've had times when I wasn't as practicing, because I think a lot of times when people go through trauma, they go through those moments of withdrawing from faith, but it wasn't withdrawing from faith as much as it was withdrawing from practices. So the belief in God is always there, but it's always evolving. You're learning, you're questioning, you're changing your perspectives.
How has your relationship or your evolution with God and your faith changed over the years?
It's definitely changed a lot. As weird as it sounds, I think I was more conservative as a child. But I guess that was just because I was constantly surrounded by that community, whether it was in high school or at the mosque. And then the more I started to establish my understanding of my identity and my faith, that changed a lot. And I feel like I would identify more as a practicing spiritual person than like the, you know, rigid structure. Because I feel like my understanding of Islam is that it flows in the way you operate in life. And I found my way to balance it. I'm not the most religious kid on the block, but my faith is there. And I do work on myself to achieve the best that I can. And if I'm not there, I understand that there's a reason that I still need to work on it.
And what is faith?
I think faith is just that level of contentment in your connection. Just knowing that connection is there. I feel like that's the greatest blessing I have, is that regardless of how hard and angry and stressful it's been, the fact that there's still a connection means I still believe. That's my faith.
That's powerful. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you think we could hear one last poem?
Absolutely.
All right. What's this one called?
What is this one called? What was it?
Ring around my finger.
Oh, this one is actually called Wrapped Around a Finger.
Let's do that part again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I totally forgot what it was.
No worries.
Where are you? Let me see. They're Wrapped Around a Finger. Yeah.
Okay. So what's this one called?
This one's called Wrapped Around a Finger.
Do you want to give any context, or are we jumping in?
Yeah, it's actually surprisingly about my wedding ring. It was a very unique story. Just as kind of a summary, it was just interesting that I'm not big on wedding rings being like super cliche and fancy and the diamond and things like that. So I was like basic, do whatever you want, get like a band or whatnot. But it was this constant like push, like no, it was a demand. And a very stressful process of like, no, you have to do this research. You have to go find it. You have to pick it. You have to. And so after I had gone through all those hoops and loops to find the ring that was appealing enough to purchase, he ended up buying a completely different one.
Oh my goodness.
And it sounds very materialistic, but
doesn't.
I think for me, it was like you put me through this circus and then you disrespected the choice I accepted. And then the ring didn't fit. And we got it sized like 3 times and it still wouldn't fit. And I was like, that's God telling you, like, it's not fitting. This doesn't fit. And so, yeah. So that's what this poem is about. It's a metaphorical representation of how this ring, just everything wasn't a fit. And even though it was loose, I was in a suffocating relationship. And so it was like that give and take of it.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. It was loose. Ironically, the only element of us that wasn't constricting me, but I hated it. I hated that oversized, unfitting stone wrapped around my finger almost as much as I hated you. I just didn't know it yet. I didn't know I was being suffocated until I finally escaped from your grasp, inhaled my first breath in 10,968 hours, recognized that the metaphorical bruises around my soul were not the marks of love you claimed them to be. It was then that I felt the weight of being both lonely and alone. Once upon a time I loved the latter, now it haunts me like a ghost, echoing its moans across the empty hallways you carved within me. Curse my heart's ability to expand in love like a mother's womb, making space for another soul to thrive. I let you in and couldn't see that I was the one dying to keep you alive. Though that dead weight around my finger and around my soul have been lifted off me, I remain in a state of remission, learning what it means to stay lonely and alone.
Snap it up. What was the line? It was the only thing not constricting, or it's right at the beginning.
Yeah. So the poem starts. It was loose. Ironically, the only element of us that wasn't constricting me.
Such good poetry.
Because everything else, I think the word suffocating was an adjective I used frequently in the relationship. And I was constantly told by not only him, but, society of like, that's normal. Anxiety and cold feet is normal. And I think to some level, like the apprehension is normal. But then when it becomes like you feel like you can't breathe, there's an issue.
Yes.
You need to get out.
Agreed.
But when you're young and you've never been in that level of commitment before, it's always been short term or kind of, you have nothing to compare it to. And you take everyone's advice who's already married or engaged and they tell you that's normal. You think, all right, I'm the problem. I'm going to go through this. I'm going to try. I'm going to keep fighting it. But, eventually the truth comes out and you recognize. And so I hope more people, recognize their intuition and what it's saying.
How has your relationship with your inner voice and trusting yourself evolved or changed?
In two polar opposites, sometimes I feel like, I was reminded to definitely never ignore it again. But I also feel like now I'm at a phase of, am I just being triggered? And is this a trigger? Is this anxiety? Because I feel like, so I'm, currently talking to someone and it's like every time something happens, I'm like, I flash back and think, is he going to react the same way? Should I not do this? And then it just causes all this unnecessary stress. And I'm like, I need to not listen to those maybe inner voices and just kind of follow my heart and the intuition of it. So it's been not a struggle. It's just been an adventure to kind of navigate between which voices are the ones I want to follow.
Yeah, it's powerful. Appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
So as you might have heard me in the beginning say, this is my year of courage.
Yeah, I love that.
Thank you. And my inspiration for that is I think that we have a like one size fits all image of what courage is. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to have everyday conversations with people about what courage looks like for them. And so, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you, what is courage for you personally?
I think courage for me is every day just waking up with the vow to continue being true to who I am. Mm. You know, what in all that I do, not just for me personally, but the work that I do for others, the work that I'm doing on a larger scale, just being unafraid to do that. Because like I said, we're constantly facing this friction of, okay, as a woman, we have the barriers. As a Muslim, I have a barrier, and then I'm Arab. And so there's like all these walls, these layers that I have to kind of break through. And so just making it through the day and trying to make a difference is an act of courage these days.
It's powerful. And what do you think fuels or grows courage?
Keep going, like doing it, and then seeing the results that come from it, that fuels courage, knowing that it's making a difference. And I think that's the hardest thing. Sometimes when we don't see the instant fruit of it, it feels very discouraging. But then, you know, there's having faith that eventually you're doing your utmost best and it'll come to it. But then there'll be like little things that sprout up here and there, and you're like, oh, it's making a difference. Someone's hearing this, someone's benefiting. And I know that the first time I wrote an article about, you know, my experience on my blog, I had someone from another state on the East Coast message me, and I don't know them, they don't know me, but they said they somehow stumbled across my article, and, you know, they felt like they found someone who understood them, and they found the courage to leave an abusive relationship. And I just thought, okay, wow, it's only been 2 months since I left mine, and all I did was share my story. I didn't know that that was enough to inspire someone to do something. So, not that I'm like the world's savior, I just feel like growing up in a society that never let women really talk, and growing up with a mother who I saw, you know, struggle to have her voice heard, and still does at some points, it just makes me feel like, no, I'm going to scream louder.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What does courage keep company with?
What does courage keep company with? I think humility, because you have to remember to, just because you're out there being courageous doesn't mean you overlook and overstep things. Keeping yourself humbled and modest in the process is important too.
That's powerful. And do you have any courage role models?
Courage role models. I have a lot. Definitely, I mean, I've said it a million times. My mom is like a big one. My grandmother is another one. So I think it's just genetics. You know, my grandmother doesn't take anything from anyone. She's out there working really hard for Syria. But you know what? My grandfather is also someone, because he's that man that was the hardcore supporter of his wife, and he never let that be an emasculating effort, which is something I see a lot today. And something that I think I have a fear of. I'm being told frequently that men will forever be emasculated by you and what you do. So it's like, okay. It's
not a real thing.
I'm like, well then, I'm going to keep doing what I do, and if that scares them, I guess I'll be single forever. Okay. You know, but seeing my grandfather being that courageous man who was like, I'm proud of my wife. My wife is amazing. She's doing great work. That makes me feel powerful.
I hate that word, emasculating. It's so made up.
I know.
It's like insecure. You're feeling insecure because you like power. Like, you're afraid of being feminine. Like, what are you searching for? It's such a made up word. Emasculating men.
Emasculating. I know. Like, there was an article there was a poll online about how do men feel whether or not their wives take their husband's last name. And a good majority of the men on the poll were like, that would be very emasculating for us. Oh my God, emasculating. I was like, but that's not, like, my name is my name. I will be Mrs. whatever, but, like, my name is my name. Yeah. You know, it's not, I'm not reducing your status because I didn't take your name. Take my name. Like, you know, I mean, it's just, there's so many things, but yeah.
Yeah. It's another conversation.
Exactly. Like, that needs another 2 hours. Yeah, so.
So what is, you know, if you walk the journey of courage, what is the reward?
Oh, that's really hard. What is the reward of walking? I think it's that contentment that knowing you gave it your all for the sake of humanity. You know, I was always taught and raised that you were brought here to serve God through service to people. And so it's not for me. So like when I think of courage, I don't want to think of it's me being courageous for me. It's the reward of courage is knowing that you've given the world your all, everything you can to the best of your ability. You didn't like half-ass something. You really gave it your all.
It's powerful. So appreciate, all the truth, all the poetry, all of the honesty that you shared with us.
I appreciate giving us the space for this and hearing
pleasure.
us.
My pleasure, my honor. And I know all those listening really appreciated it as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so I want to encourage y'all to let her know. So what is the places people can reach out to you?
I am available on all social media. Lady Narrator. That's my online and poetry name. So I'm available through all those mediums. Feel free to reach out. So
at Lady Narrator?
At Lady Narrator, at Lady_Narrator for Instagram and Twitter. Okay. And then on Facebook, it's just Lady Narrator or Dania Alkhouli. Like they're my name. Okay, perfect. Do you have a website you want people to go to buy your book? Yeah, it's actually Oceans and Flames is available on Amazon.
Oh!
So, yeah, so you can order on Amazon, or if you ever see me in person, I have copies and we can do a sale there. Yes, indeed. So, yeah. But don't buy it on Amazon until after the strike. Oh, and then we will. Yeah, after the strike. Just come meet me in person and just call me and we'll work something out. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate the heck out of you joining us. Thank you. I appreciate this too. Yes, and for the folks who are regular listeners, you're making the connection that Dania will be our feature for this Sunday's live and online expression session, which is July 22nd. This Sunday, it is from 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you're on the East Coast, that is 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Midwest. That is 2 to 4. If you're in England, that is 8 o'clock. Nigeria, that is also 8 o'clock. If you're anywhere else in the world, use a time converter. You can join us anywhere in the world by phone, by video, and Dania is going to be our feature, and we're going to go through a really awesome writing workshop where you can speak and share your truth as well. If you're listening to this after the fact, you're like, dang it, why didn't I listen to this episode on time? Then what you can do is head to tomrell.com/courses and you can sign up for free. Art Makes Impact, and you can watch all of our replays for free. Or just send me a message and I'll send you the link. You can listen to it for free. Very cool. Yes, indeed. Anything else you want to add? No, I think that's, this was great. Appreciate that. Yeah. I agree. I'd like you to have the last word. So my question for you is, what would you like to invite those listening or watching? What would you like to invite them to consider, to do, to be, to hear? What is your invitation? My invitation would be, I think when you're trying to contribute or do something, maybe start off by doing it thinking that only you're gonna be the one inspecting it or looking at it, because I found that when I try to write something or do something or create something, I'm always thinking about how is this gonna be perceived. But then when I write a poem, for example, that I'm like, you know what, Dania, no one's gonna see this, so write it the way you want to. It ends up being the most raw, the most powerful, and then it ends up being the one that makes the biggest impact. So I think getting out of your skin of, that outer skin helps you find your greatest potential. And we actually had to do that exercise in one of my dance classes where they made us dance blindfolded. Wow. In a room full of 100 people. Like, it's not 100 people, but it was just a room full of a lot of people. And they're like, you might trip on someone, you might step on someone, but dance with your eyes closed, blindfolded, and just follow the music. There's no choreography. And when we were done, the instructor was like, you danced like I've never seen you dance in the whole semester. I was like, I think it's because we're not holding ourselves back. So I think that's the biggest takeaway that I would advise people is kind of strip down those societal constructions and the fears and anxiety and judgments, because you probably can produce a lot better than you even know. And I think that's what changed a lot in the last 2-3 years of my life. It was like, I'm no longer worrying about people's reactions, because I know that I'm offering the best that I can, without hidden agendas. I'm trying to do the best that I can. So I'm not holding back. I love it. Yes, indeed. Write for yourself and don't hold back. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, thank you once again, everybody, for listening, for being with us. And as always, we're wishing you peace and blessings.
Oh, one more thing. I'd love to continue the conversation. Feel free to join me at tomearl.com/join. Subscribe below, or let's connect on social media. Tom Earl Artist. Thanks again for watching.